Okay, so in the first instance, I think we need to explore the concept of cultural production to, I guess, ground the concept of how social media impacts on those who are producing and consuming cultural content. Later on in the lecture, we'll get to a specific case study, which is relating to the 7 Days Later case, which you would have read in your literature this week. But in the first instance, I want to refer back to Hinton and Horth because they have a great way of working through the concept of art and creativity and cultural institutions within that context of social media. So in thinking about cultural production, I think it's best to go back to the Frankfurt School tradition. So this tension between culture and a capitalist society is a good way to think about that. A lot of great theorists emerged from that space pre-World War II. Adorno and Horkheimer, probably the two that are most relevant in this scenario, particularly around their concept of splitting content or culture as a distinguished polar between high and low culture. So high culture was there to encourage critical engagement and thinking around the material, whereas low culture is more low-level entertainment from the cultural industry. So it's sort of television, or well, in this time, radio, press, that kind of thing. And this is how we start to understand how the power of, or the loci of power and media. So more popular media content, more power, so talking to more audiences. Then we fast forward through to the Birmingham School of Thinking around cultural studies, and this is where Stuart Hall comes into the concept, into the picture. And I think a really useful concept here is, again, his encoding and decoding concept, which then starts to place the power away from the producer of the media content towards the consumer of the media content. And his thinking is that users are not passive consumers, but rather active in how they decode the message or how they create meaning around a text. This is also similar to the train of thought that Roland Barthes, one of the deconstructivists of during 1960s, was a lot of this work, and he was very popular. Well, one of his ideas was the death of the author. So this concept that we're shifting slowly away from the production of content towards the consumption of content. Again, moving away quite a significant distance from Adorno and his thinking, he and others, their thinking around the concept of power and media and how it's produced. And now we're starting to see a shift in that power landscape as we're now focusing on the consumption of media products and how that's an empowering process. Duguay then comes to it from a different perspective and starts to think of it, cultural industries as an ecosystem in terms of it's not just how producers or audiences are relating to media content and how the power relationship works, but it's more so it's involved in a larger environment. And an easy way to think about this is television ratings, for example. So producers are following television ratings to try and understand how the audience are reacting to certain types or genres of production. So in that sense, you see the audience, a group of audience, directly responding to the production from the producers, and the producers directly responding to what the audience likes. So it's this iterative type of ecosystem that's emerging. What we do see now is the consumption, cultural production and its consumption is moving away from the larger organisational structures, and the image above is to demonstrates that quite well in terms of we've moved away from this high culture, low culture aspect of cultural industries. And museums are now really trying to engage their audiences in a popular kind of context as well. So what we might like to think about now as we move through the rest of this week's thinking is how social media impacts on this type of relationship. So how cultural institutions, and again, we'll look at a media organisation as a cultural institution and a specific case study, how they're engaging social media and users as cultural producers. So it's an interesting lens to think about creativity and cultural institutions, and then how users are engaging in social networking sites and various forms, platforms and technologies to become cultural producers themselves. I'd invite you to have a look at some of the examples below of various museums that are using these sorts of platforms and case studies to engage users and shift the dynamic of the environment, of the traditional type of cultural institution. So do that. And back in a minute.